This podcast contains adult language and stories of true crime. If you don't like laughing, crying, or being horrified at the actions of other humans, this podcast is not for you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Resolve Mysteries. This is part 2 of season 3, episode 18. If you missed part 1, it's there in the feed, so go listen to it first. And if you have no idea who we are and you're super lost, this is the show where we rewatch, recap, and give you the latest updates on cases featured on the show Unsolved Mysteries. I'm Allison.
I'm Eliza.
And I'm Karlin.
We just switched to a weekly format if you're just catching up with us. So, ladies, what are you guys talking about this episode?
This episode, I have a Legends segment of the one, the only, Butch Cassidy.
Ooh.
And we've got a Lost Loves about Aleatha Evertz and her siblings.
Awesome. All right, let's do it.
Okay, y'all, this is a Legends segment, and we've got Butch Cassidy ready for your ears. So I was not excited about this segment because I'm like, I don't care about white guys robbing people. I don't care about the Wild West unless I'm watching Westworld. I just don't care. But I was pleasantly surprised once I did some research, as I said in the introduction.
This is the real Westworld, baby.
This is it, baby. Okay, so this is going to go all sorts of ways because I was also able to research by watching another show and listening to a podcast and watching a documentary.
Yes, honey.
I would like to raise my hand and congratulate all three of us on doing an awesome job this episode.
Oh, truly. We're killing it. Okay, this episode is going to win us a Peabody, I think. This is it. Us being the mouthpiece and bringing other people's research they've already done into one platform, this is going to be the one that wins us.
That's
I mean,
I can't wait.
Let's be honest. Isn't that what true crime podcasting is all
Oh,
about?
God, of course.
Yeah, come on.
But has a true crime podcast ever won a Peabody? Now that's a question. I wonder if Serial did.
Oh, I could see that.
But that's different.
They're journalists.
I guess I don't see the difference, actually.
They're not drinking Corona in their bedroom while talking about Butch
How dare you.
Cassidy.
Underneath a pile of cats.
They don't even have cats.
Okay, so Stack opens the segment by telling us that the names Robert Leroy Parker and Harry Alonzo Longabaugh don't often ring a bell. That's because they're better known as the legendary outlaws from the late 1800s, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yes.
Paul Newman and Robert Redford starred in the celebrated film about their final days. Have either of you seen it? I haven't either. That was my last thing I wanted to watch.
Oh, but what a delicious combination. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh, those Hollywood hotties. Stack says the movie, like history, tells us that Butch and Sundance died in a shootout in South America. But some believe that Hollywood and history may be wrong. There is evidence that Butch Cassidy returned to the United States and died of natural causes. So at this point in the segment, we're about 10 seconds in, and I'm thinking, wait a second, I don't know anything about Butch Cassidy except that he robbed trains, and I don't care that he might still have been alive if I don't know anything about his backstory. Like, they really didn't talk about it at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Well, I guess back then
Everyone knew. Everyone knew. I know.
it was much closer to the Wild West back in the 80s.
It was, in fact, 80 years away, so... I mean, but the movie had, like, recently, in the last 20 years or 10 years or whatever it was, had recently come out, so...
That's true.
It's true. It was more in the zeitgeist.
That's true.
So I needed to care, so I did some research, and I'm going to fill in now before we head back into the UM segment.
That's great, because I need to care as well.
Okay, great.
I already care, for the record.
Wow.
I'm here for it. I love the Wild West. Haven't you ever seen Tombstone? Deadwood? It's amazing.
Oh, gosh. My partner loves Deadwood.
Ooh,
loves
me
him
too.
some Deadwood. So in my research, I found out a few interesting things. Robert Leroy Parker, who is Butch Cassidy, was born on April 13th, 1866 in Beaver, Utah Territory. He was the first of 13 children of British immigrants Maximilian Parker and Anne Campbell Gillies. And his parents had converted to the Mormon faith while they were still living in the UK. And then they moved to Utah.
I'm sorry, there were Mormons in the UK back then?
Well, haven't you ever heard of Mormon missionaries, honey?
Oh, okay. Oh.
I don't know. I don't know if they had missionaries then, but probably.
I mean, how else did they get to the UK?
I mean, a lot of why Utah is settled by so many Mormons is because of them converting and then going there as like, that's where they're all going to be. So
Interesting.
So Robert Parker, Butch Cassidy, grew up on his parents' ranch near Circleville, about 215 miles south of Salt Lake City. And he took a job at the age of 13 at a nearby ranch to help support the family because they had very little money. They're moving there in the mid-1800s. It's not this bustling place by any means. It's like desolate and dry, and learning to like starting your own ranch with soil not being right. You know, like crop preparation is such a huge scientific thing. I don't know how anyone survived in these days, honestly. Allison is from New Jersey, and she is looking at me like I am crazy. She's like, I don't want to hear the word crops ever in my life.
I'm like, how is there not a city there just waiting for your immigrant ass like my family?
Yes. Truly. It looks horrible. They showed pictures in this documentary I watched, and it just was like, this is hell. This is truly my hell.
Oh, honey.
So he gets this job on a nearby ranch. His family didn't have a lot of money, and he's working on this ranch, and he meets a cattle thief that also works on the ranch, and his name is Mike Cassidy. And Mike Cassidy was sort of like his big brother / best friend. They got along really well. Mike Cassidy sort of like showed him the ropes, quote unquote, on like living the cowboy life and being a horseman, but also like how you have to steal sometimes to get what you need, and was just sort of a mentor to him. So that's where the last name Cassidy comes from for Butch Cassidy, which was one of the first things I was curious about.
Huh.
And then he just like adopted this man's last name. And then throughout time, his teenage years, he worked on several ranches, in addition to a brief apprenticeship with a butcher in Rock Springs, Wyoming. And that's where he got his nickname Butch from working at a butcher shop.
Cool.
And we'll get into it, but his name's Butch sounded very like, oh, he must be such a bro asshole. But he's not. He's kind of a honey.
Oh my God. I love this.
Okay. So here's one way he's a honey. He had ridden his horse like 7 miles or something really far to get to a shop in town, and people aren't sure exactly what age he would have been, but in his teenage years, maybe around 14. And he needs some say it was jeans, some say it was a pair of overalls, but he rides all this way and he gets there and the shop is closed. And he's like, I've ridden all this way and I need them jeans. And so he breaks into the clothing shop. He takes the clothes that he needs, but he leaves them an IOU, promising to pay when he's like next by the shop. But the sheriff of the town doesn't like this and tracks him down, and that's sort of his first like run-in with the law.
Well, a town can't run on IOUs, honey.
I mean, it's true. Although I think IOUs were a lot more common then.
For sure.
True. And like travel wasn't as easy. So he's like, this literally took me all day. I'm taking these clothes that I need. So one of the podcast I mentioned is called Most Notorious, and they did an episode on Butch Cassidy. And they have Charles Hearson on, who wrote a book called Butch Cassidy, The True Story of an American Outlaw. And Hearson really seemed to think that Butch Cassidy did mean to pay the shopkeeper back, and that he had traveled miles to get to the shop, and he just wanted those overalls or whatever they were. So he's, in all of his research Cassidy thinks he was like a well-meaning person. Also, like, grew up Mormon, really strict family with, they mostly only learned the Bible, so you'd think maybe they had been taught good values. Like, that's one of the things that people say about him is that he grew up so entrenched in religion. And in some ways he wanted to get away from that, but also he did have that background. Like, it's not like he was raised by outlaws.
Yeah.
Like some of them are. Hearson also says, this author, although Butch Cassidy would eventually go on to rob trains and banks, he is not known to have ever killed a man during his time in the States, which is, like, unheard of for outlaws.
Yeah.
He also forbid his gang, called the Wild Bunch, to use guns. Yep, they're called the Wild Bunch. He often stole from large corporations. So once he's, like, going as an outlaw, the railroad, mining companies, the banks. Hearson gives a little context about the time, and he said, if you were a homesteader in Wyoming and a large cattle company wanted your land, they might just take the dad out of the house and shoot him and make the family leave and take that land from you.
Oh, my God.
Like, it's the Wild West in not just that outlaws are doing what they want, it's that corporations are just stealing. And it started then. Like, it's not different now.
Oh. It's funny because you think that they would govern themselves, but I guess not.
Look at how that doesn't work out.
Ever.
So Cassidy and his gang were fighting against the power that corporations had. Hearson also said that although Cassidy wasn't a true Robin Hood type since he didn't directly give the money to the poor, but he sort of was, because after he would rob a train or a bank, they would all celebrate in town, gambling, buying drinks for everyone, and, spending time with women and basically putting money back into the local economy.
Wow.
And it made me realize, too, like, it's not like these guys can save up their money and eventually retire and buy a big house. Like, they're going to be on the run forever, and they know that. And so they're going to – and they also can't be just carrying around tons and tons of cash. Like, they spend it.
Yeah.
And then I also thought it was so interesting. I learned from a documentary I watched, which I'll talk about in a second, that many times the locals were on the outlaws' side, especially the Wild Bunch, because they just wanted to steal from big companies. Like, it's said that they would get onto trains and people would be really scared and, like, start handing over their wallets. And Butch Cassidy would say, we don't want your money, we want their money.
Wow.
Ooh.
I know. I love it. I know. Are you smitten or what?
Oh, my God. I am full on in love.
You're speaking her language.
So, but the locals, knowing, this kind of lore about them, and they were so hurt by the big corporations and by the railroads and everything that they were like, yeah, we like what you're doing. Hurt them. That's great. And they'd often make them meals, invite them back to their houses to stay for a night while they're on the run until they can get to their next place.
Wow.
And then often the money, like a little bit of money that Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, who I'll talk about in a bit, would leave behind would be enough to, like, save their ranch for another little while. I know.
Oh, my God.
I know. Okay, so one train robbery that was depicted in the documentary that I watched, which is called The Last Outlaws, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's on Amazon Prime. It's pretty good. I found it when I was looking for the film starring Robert Redford and Paul Newman, but that's not available for streaming. It's only available for rent, and I just couldn't spend the $3.99. I can look at pictures and get an idea.
It's not like we have an account for that or anything.
It was also last night, and I decided, I think this documentary will help me with my research more than this fictionalized movie will. So I had to choose.
Good call.
Yes. So the robbery that they open with sort of in this documentary is called the Wilcox robbery. And in this train robbery, Butch Cassidy and his gang stood on the tracks holding a lantern in front of the train. And so this like signals for the train to stop. And the train stops, thinking like possibly they're being warned about tracks or an issue up ahead. Like maybe it's railroad workers trying to warn them. But of course, everyone on the train is nervous because it's not normal for a train to just stop in the middle of the desert. But when the robbers board the train, they actually separate the engine car from the passenger cars. And knowing that that's where the safe was kept.
Oh, my God.
Then they blow up the engine car with so much dynamite, like too much. They didn't need it to be that much. There are pictures of the train after it's blown up. But they separated the passenger cars so like that they would not get hurt.
Oh.
And there's just money flying. They are able to make away with $50,000, which in today's money is like $1 million.
Oh, my gosh.
And no one was hurt and all of that. So in another robbery that the author Hearson talked about, they had all the passengers get off the train and then they blew it up.
Wow.
But they were like, you can get off first, which is like...
Yeah.
They're not heartless.
Nice.
They're, yeah. So at this point, they're gaining more notoriety, and the Pinkerton National Detective Agency gets involved.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that the Pinkerton logo, which just has an eye on it that says "We Never Sleep," that's where the term "private eye" came from. I didn't know that.
It.
I know.
Cool.
Because they're a private detective agency. They're like the first one, but they have offices all over. It's such an interesting time historically because technology is improving. So the telegraph helps them, which also, how the hell do you read a telegraph? And what if they make a mistake? How do you say, oops, typo, start over on a telegraph? How do you do that?
Know.
I think there was just a lot of miscommunication back then.
Honestly. So, yeah, they're able to, like, communicate quickly and get to work. So after this Wilcox robbery, where they had stolen so much money, of course, the railroad companies are pissed. And they're like, this has to stop happening. We want our trains to be safe, but mostly they just want their money. Mm-hmm. So the corporations hire the agency, and Pinkerton was actually used by Lincoln during the Civil War to spy on Confederate forces.
Whoa.
I have a book for you about the first female Pinkerton.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, this woman named Kate. She actually she helped work with Lincoln because she was a woman, so no one suspected her. So they acted like she was Mary Todd's maid.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. That's amazing.
Wow. How far back does it go?
I think it was around this time. Like, it probably started, I don't know. When was the Civil War? What years?
They were established 1850.
Okay. Oh, that sounds fun. I want to read that book. So after the Wilcox robbery, the Pinkerton Agency had over 100 men looking for the Wild Bunch in that area. They used the most modern techniques and began tracking the serial numbers for the bills they had stolen.
Ooh.
And I was like, how did they do that? But I guess they sent the serial numbers to banks, hotels, other businesses that could check, and then those businesses would check their bills coming in against the ones that were stolen.
Wow.
Yep. I think that's how they still do it when they track.
Okay, I didn't know if now it was just like it just immediately gets put into a system. I don't know. So for 9 months, they track these bills, and they are coming up with a trail of where the Wild Bunch has probably gone. And they notice some popping up in New Mexico. And Butch Cassidy is there, posing as a ranch hand, but he gets tipped off before the Pinkertons can close in on him. So he then goes to Fort Worth, Texas, and meets the rest of the Wild Bunch there. And they pose for a picture. This is an infamous picture. If you don't think you've seen it, you've probably seen it, of 5 of them. And the Sundance Kid is also in it. We'll post it, of course. But when the photographer puts the picture in his window, just like as an advertisement for his portfolio, an officer walks by and recognizes one of the gang members, which I'm like, I mean, photography is not widespread at this time, so maybe they just didn't think of it. But it's like, you don't get your picture taken. Don't do that. You're on the run.
Yeah.
Like, at this point, I don't think many people knew necessarily what they looked like. The Pinkerton Agency was, like, writing down descriptions of them, but they did not have photographs of them.
Right.
So now they do. The Pinkertons take this photograph. They're putting it in newspapers. They're making copies of it. Now every detective has a picture of all of these guys, and they know exactly what they look like. So this really turns things for them
Oh my God.
for the worse. So this makes Sundance and Cassidy realize that they need to get out. So they decide to escape to Argentina. And Sundance's girlfriend, Etta Place, goes with them. And her name's Ethel Place, but she went by Etta. And she's a total mystery. And I really want to do a short stack on her. I wanted to put more in about her in this segment, but then I was able to find enough. So first, the three of them go to New York City. And in the documentary, it's really cool because it shows, you know, reenactments of them like just blending in with wealthy bankers and businessmen and all the people they've been stealing from the whole time.
Love it.
Oh, it's so good. And they have money because they have saved up money. And so they're able to spend things with everyone, drink with everyone, and no one knows who they really are.
Oh my God.
And then Etta and Sundance even get a picture taken together, posing as a married couple, of course, because they probably wouldn't have taken their picture otherwise. And we'll post that picture. And they even go to Tiffany's and buy her a fancy watch.
Ooh, honey, high rolling.
Honey. So then they spend a few days in New York, and eventually they board a steamship to Argentina. Meanwhile, they had asked other members of the Wild Bunch, like, you should come with us. Things are closing in. We can't hide anymore. And no one else wanted to go with them. And eventually all of them are caught, and many of them are killed. One of them even dies by suicide instead of being taken in.
Wow.
And if they're not killed, they are taken to prison. So that probably would have been Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid's fate as well. So 2 years go by in Argentina. Etta, Cassidy, and Sundance have built a 4-bedroom home, started a ranch with 300 heads of cattle, made friends, and settled into a quiet life. Then a letter one of them sends home to the States gets intercepted, and suddenly the Pinkertons, who have not stopped looking for them, know exactly where they are.
No.
It's so frustrating. So they immediately tell the Argentine authorities that there are highly wanted men in their area. And Sundance and Cassidy hear about this, and they realize we have to leave everything behind and go on the run again. They've worked so hard.
They've established a whole farm.
Yes.
God.
And then it's at this point in history that Etta Place completely disappears. No one knows what happened to her.
Did she stay in Argentina?
Maybe, but they stuck out. They're white in this country. So,
Wow.
I don't know. There are many theories, so that's kind of why I want to do a short stack about it.
Fun.
But she doesn't go with them on the run. She just disappears.
Or maybe goes on her own on the run. Maybe they're like, let's split up.
Right. So, as the documentary puts it, technology catches up with all bandits and Wild West gangs, which is why Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid are two of the last. Not only are high-speed trains going in instead of, like, the typical slow trains that they could literally stop with a lantern. Like, that's not happening anymore with these high-speed trains. And then trains are also being guarded by armed guards. The telegraph allows for quick communication from city to city, which makes it harder to hide. And this is especially the case for Cassidy and Sundance, who begin to steal again in Argentina as they run from authorities. But the telegraph can get to Argentina too, and vice versa. So they know the authorities are closing in on them, so they cross the border into Bolivia. But descriptions of them have spread everywhere in that country as well. And they don't know these trails or this country or this land like they did in the States.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's also them doing what they knew how to do, but in a totally different area. And also they barely spoke the language and they stuck out because they were white.
Wow.
So in Bolivia, they're holed up in this house, and the mayor of the town of San Vicente, which is where they were, hears that there are 2 white men there, and they send an official to question the men. And according to the documentary, which I hadn't heard this before, Butch Cassidy actually sees this authority outside with his gun, and he fires at the soldier and kills him. And this is thought to be the only person he ever killed. Now the whole town surrounds the house, and they're all heavily armed, and a gun battle ensues. And then gunshots go quiet from inside the house, but no one wants to go inside until daylight. And the next morning, when locals enter, they find Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid dead. And the documentary said, this is also the first time I had heard this, from an apparent murder-suicide. So the Sundance Kid had a bullet hole that went from one temple to the other. I think his was in his forehead, and Butch Cassidy's was temple to temple. So Cassidy killed Sundance and then killed himself. Wow. And I have a little more information about that a little later. So this is where the UM segment picks up. And it's like, you have to say more.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, whatever. I'm glad this segment wasn't longer, I guess. But also, I don't care about this William Phillips guy unless I know anything about Butch Cassidy. So we're back to UM. So 2 years after Butch and Sundance were supposedly killed, a man named William Thaddeus Phillips arrived in Spokane, Washington.
Because again, where else does anyone ever go?
Of course. So Phillips opened a successful machine shop and became a prominent businessman. According to writer James Delenti, Phillips was a man without a past. So Delenti says in UM, the first definitive record of William Phillips was his marriage certificate, dated May 14th, 1908. There is no other previous record of William Phillips. About 1922, the first reports began circulating in the West that Butch Cassidy had returned, and people began to say that Butch Cassidy was William Phillips. So there are some people that see a resemblance between William Phillips and Butch Cassidy, but if Phillips was Cassidy, then how did the outlaw escape from Bolivia? So according to some historians, the account of how Butch and Sundance died can be credited to one man, Percy Siebert. So Siebert had worked with the outlaws at a tin mine in Bolivia and became friends with them. And he was the one who was asked by authorities to identify the bodies. And they show this in the UM segment, this reenactment. Writer Larry Pointer, and he's the writer who really drives this segment, and he's the one that is putting forth this theory that William T. Phillips is actually Butch Cassidy. He thinks that Siebert deliberately lied. So he says, I believe that Percy told the story of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid's death in Bolivia to pay back what he felt was a debt of loyalty and friendship, to allow these outlaws to begin a life under amnesty without a past, which is kind of a nice thought. Like, that would be a cool thing to do and he probably, whatever, if this really happened, he probably walked into that room. I imagine them pulling back the blankets to show their faces and him realizing, oh my God, that's not them, but I'm going to say it is, which is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
If that happened. So Larry Pointer is convinced that Butch Cassidy took on the identity of William Phillips. As Phillips, he returned to the Wyoming mountains where Butch and his outlaw gang had once been. The other writer, James Delenti, says he's heard firsthand reports about Phillips. Quote, we know the man who went with Phillips to Wyoming in 1933. This man died recently, but we have interviewed him. He was there all summer with Phillips, and he met all the old-timers that Phillips met, and in almost every case, these old-timers accepted Phillips as Cassidy.
Huh.
Then we have writer Dan Buck, and he has researched the life and death of Butch Cassidy, and he is convinced that William Phillips was just an imposter, so wasn't actually Cassidy. And he says, old-timer stories are always the most interesting and the least reliable.
Mm-hmm.
The William Phillips story is chock full of old-timer tales, people that claim they were good friends with Cassidy and knew Phillips was Cassidy. And he makes a good point. Usually when it's asked by someone, only when prompted. So they might say, well, you were a good friend of Butch Cassidy's, weren't you? And of course the answer is going to be yes, because who wants to say no?
Yeah. True.
So in Wyoming, Phillips met a woman named Mary Boyd Rhodes. And in 1934, Mary and her 16-year-old granddaughter, Ione, rode out to Phillips' campsite. And we've got Ione, of course, as an old woman, as a talking head telling us this story. And she says, the man that my grandmother met that day was going by the name of William Phillips, and she knew him by the name of Leroy George Parker, who is known as Butch Cassidy. His birth name was Robert Leroy Parker. But then in this segment, so many people are saying George and passing that off like it's regular, so I don't know. But she says it with a twinkle in her eye, like, as soon as I say Leroy George Parker, you're going to know that I mean Butch Cassidy, and isn't that exciting? She says, he recognized her immediately, which, of course, he would if he's trying to pretend he's someone that she knew.
Yeah.
And she recognized him. I sensed they had a relationship that I had never known much about, so my grandmother had finally told me that he was her childhood sweetheart. So 3 years later, Phillips mailed a ring to Mary, and it was engraved George C. to Mary B. Phillips died soon afterwards. Dan Buck believes that Phillips pretended to be Cassidy just for the fun of it. So he says he traveled out to the West, he met some people, he probably got some free beers, he certainly got a lot of adventures out of it. But some people have recently done photo comparisons of the two and established that they have different heads and different faces.
Just different heads. Just entirely different heads.
And he says, this is my favorite, and it's true. Cassidy basically had small features on a big head with a lantern jaw, and Phillips had normal features with a more or less pointed chin, and his head was basically an inch or more lower than Butch Cassidy's. And we'll post these, but they show grids on the faces, and they're truly just different people.
Like, no, this guy's head is too low.
It's too low. And the features on the other guy, too small.
A big head, small face is unfortunate. I've seen it.
Oh, gosh. It's unfortunate. But several other clues, apparently, suggest that Butch and Phillips were one and the same. Phillips wrote a manuscript called The Bandit Invincible, the story of Butch Cassidy. According to the first author we heard from, James Stilenti, it contains specific details about Butch's adventures that nobody else could have known. Which, how do you prove that? Right. If you also know it, then you knew it. Or if you didn't know it, then the guy just made it up. This is so silly. So then UM, which I love when UM's like, let us try to help. So they bring in a handwriting expert named Sheila Lowe, and she analyzes Butch Cassidy's writing against the manuscript written by Phillips. Because some of them are thinking, well, Phillips, wrote this manuscript as Phillips telling stories about the bandit, but he would only know it if he were Butch Cassidy. So she compares them, and she says they are exactly the same. Now, I disagree, and we'll post a picture of that, but also I'm not a graphologist, which is what that's called as a handwriting expert. She's got her light table, honey. She's overlaying those two handwriting samples. She says they perfectly match up, but I don't really think that they do. So Phillips also owned this 6-shot Colt revolver, and carved into the pistol grip was a unique brand. Larry Pointer, again, who's the one that is driving this whole theory, says it's significant. Quote, that brand was the reverse E box E. That was Butch Cassidy's brand in the 1890s, which maybe he just carved that in there because he knew that was his brand. Okay, so that's where the segment basically leaves off. It's asking a question that no one really cares about because it's not. They've proved by showing those pictures to us that Phillips is not Butch Cassidy. Like, they solved their own mystery. I think there's other more interesting mysteries around this, like where did Etta Place go? I wish they had talked about that. Okay, so I have some research to follow up with. In 1993, a forensic anthropologist believes that skeletal remains found in Bolivia are those of Butch Cassidy. There's also evidence that Cassidy shot Sundance in the head and then killed himself after both were probably gravely wounded in the gun battle. So maybe after they had been shot but weren't dead yet, and they're just like, well, let's just end this. It's over anyway.
Okay.
So that was another piece that said it was maybe a murder-suicide, which was interesting. And I read in something else, too, that like they could tell based on the shattering of the skull. So this anthropologist, whose last name is Snow, was trying to solve this mystery. And do you remember or have you ever seen, I think it's still on, the show Nova?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The BBC?
So, BBC? Yeah. So he was examining these skeletal remains for Nova.
Oh, cool.
But I couldn't find that segment. And then we see Dan Buck again in this article, who was in He's the naysayer who was trying to say, no, Phillips is not Cassidy. And he's working with Snow, trying to help debunk the theory. So it's kind of fun to see like their same names pop up. He says, quote, there's more than 50 different accounts ranging from them getting killed in Paris, France, Mexico, Uruguay, Bolivia, a dozen different places in the U.S., twice in the same year in Spokane.
Spokane? My God.
He says, we're certain 2 English-speaking bandits were killed because that's what the records say in Bolivia he's talking about. There is circumstantial evidence they were using aliases Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were known to have had. And a longtime resident of the community had told them that they were buried in the grave that we dug up.
Oh. Seems pretty solid.
Yeah. So this is 93. So they're like pretty optimistic. So then in 2000, then what I could find in 2014... I found an article about Larry Pointer, and Larry Pointer has self-published a new book called Butch Cassidy's Story, Bandit Invincible, in which Pointer does something remarkable, admits he was wrong. So in this new book, Pointer has found compelling proof about the true identity of William T. Phillips. He was, in fact, William T. Wilcox, who probably rode with Butch and possibly knocked off a bank or two with him and undoubtedly swapped stories around campfires with Butch.
Oh, cool.
But he was not Butch Cassidy.
Okay.
But he was still like
he knew
a wild
him.
bunch.
He was in the wild bunch.
And he's trying to escape, and he's going to keep his same name, and he's going to use stories kind of that Butch had, but... It's funny because he's trying to be like, no, I'm William Phillips, guys. And everyone's like, no, you're Butch Cassidy. And he's like, I'm trying to be one fake person. And now you're making me into this legend fake person. Like, the funniest thing about it is that he never says, I'm Butch Cassidy. Like, he's not even trying to say that.
Yeah.
Pointer's earlier book, In Search of Butch Cassidy, made a sensation in 1977 when it made the case that Butch changed his name, went straight, and lived out his life as a quiet Spokane machinist. The new book has made a different kind of sensation. Quote, the toughest thing I had to do was go down to Lander, Wyoming and do a book signing and say I was wrong, said Pointer, 72.
Aww.
He said the response has covered the gamut. Some people still cling to Pointer's original conclusion. Some believe he is disingenuous for changing his mind, and plenty believed he was wrong all along. Pointer isn't as broken up about this as you might think because he doesn't believe that history is a competition or an argument. History, he said, is simpler. It is what is there. And during the last 3 years, he found 2 pieces of evidence that turned his theory on its head. The first was a manuscript, and the second was a prison mugshot. The manuscript was something Phillips wrote, which I already mentioned, toward the end of his life in Spokane. It was called Bandit Invincible, and it was an account of Butch Cassidy's life as told by a man who had, quote, known Butch since early boyhood. Phillips seems to have written it in hope of stirring some interest from Hollywood, which obviously never came to fruition for him, but the handwritten manuscript was not stylistically polished and was jammed with authentic and sympathetic details about Cassidy's life. Obviously, we had already known about this manuscript, and they had gotten the handwriting analyst to say, yes, this is definitely Butch Cassidy. Now, Pointer's sort of using this manuscript as, it makes sense that he is actually William T. Wilcox, who did spend time with Butch Cassidy, which it's like, didn't you consider that from the beginning instead of just going all in on your other theory?
Yeah.
But, okay, so the mugshot that he finds is of Wilcox, and he lines up William T. Phillips and William Wilcox pictures, and they're identical. Like, the Butch Cassidy and the Phillips guy didn't look the same. Literally different faces and different heads, but it took Pointer finding a picture of Wilcox to say, oh my God, that is the guy that is Phillips that I've been thinking this whole time. And he says, he remembers the day vividly in 2011 when he found the mugshot. When that image appeared on my computer, it was a kick in the pit of my stomach. There was no question in my mind that I was looking at an image of William T. Phillips, which, like, good for him for believing something for that long and not doubling down, but realizing he
made a mistake.
Wrong.
Yeah. And telling everybody about it.
Yeah. So in 2011, the belief that William T. Phillips and Butch Cassidy were the same person was finally put to rest. Larry Pointer was able to find new information. Like I mentioned, witnesses from that time claimed to have seen Wilcox and Cassidy together, disproving the belief that they were the same person. Like, if William Phillips is William Wilcox, then Wilcox and Cassidy were together. They could not be the same person.
Yes.
But, yeah, Pointer still believes that Butch Cassidy survived the shootout and did come to the United States.
Oh, so he's holding on to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, I'm almost done. So then the documentary writers and, like, talking heads, they kind of say, this is what happens with legends. Like, nobody wants their legends to die, so they want the narrative to go on, and they make up, you know, these fantastical stories about them, and just the way word spreads in that time, too. Like you said, miscommunications, and also just, it's already a made-up story that's getting blown out of proportion over and over, and
it's like impossible to prove anything anyway.
Right. So the documentary was like, no, he died there, and it's hard for people to accept that, but he did. And it's not as fun of a story either. But like I said, I really was most interested when I first started researching this in Etta Place and other women that were associated with the Wild Bunch, because there were a few of them.
Oh, yeah.
And just like an outlaw woman in general is such a fun thing to think about. So we love it. So I might save that for a grab bag short stack. But that is the story of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I guess I took some of the stuff out about the Sundance Kid, but so first, I didn't know that Robert Redford started Sundance Film Festival.
Oh.
Yes. And he named it after his character.
I love.
Don't you love it?
I did not know that.
So
I was just
much.
wondering if there was any connection.
Yes.
Do we know why he was called Sundance?
That is less known. All I could find was that he got that name after being in prison for a while. But it's unclear. How? I know, it's because it's a pretty name. And then Kid was a really common name, like Billy the Kid. That was kind of a name for, like, guy or boy or kind of troublemaker a little bit. So it sounds funny to our ears because it sounds like, oh, he's just a kid. But it wasn't really used like that then.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice
So
job.
that's it.
Loved it.
Bang, 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 bang. Except no bang bangs. They didn't do that.
So, our fourth segment is A Lost Loves, and it is about Aleatha Evertz, and it takes place in Lakewood, Colorado in 1960. Stack says, another day begins for the Smith family. Once again, 5-year-old Aleatha is left alone to care for her younger brothers and sister. 5.
It's too sad.
Yeah, this one's really sad.
So Aleatha is interviewed, and she said, and she's an adult in the interview. She says, we would wake up in the morning and be alone, and Richard and I would go in and get Marty and Noreen out of bed. Richard was 4, Marty was around 3, and Noreen just about 2. So this is over top a reenactment of little 5-year-old Aleatha pulling the 2-year-old out of the crib. She says, sometimes she'd just about fall, but we got her out. It was like the whole family working on trying to get this little kid out of the crib. She says, we'd make peanut butter toast, and that was breakfast. Aleatha says she remembers giving Noreen bottles and asking Marty to stop sucking his thumb. It was empty, but we were afraid. I know I was. Stack explains to us that Aleatha's parents got married as teenagers, unprepared for the challenges of raising a family, and sadly, both were often absent from the home. 5-year-old Aleatha assumed the role of mother, father, and protector for her brothers Richard and Marty and her sister Noreen. When their parents separated, the children were placed in foster care. In July 1960, the Smith children were sent to live with foster parents Frank and Marianne Wiley, which I was shocked to hear they even went to the same foster home.
Yeah.
For the first time, the children knew the comfort and security of a stable home.
They're so nice.
So they have an interview with sweet Marianne Wiley.
Oh my gosh.
Who describes the children, and she's talking about each of their different little personalities. You can tell she loved them.
Yeah.
She says, Aleatha was just a sweet little girl. They were nice little kids to have.
Oh,
just
honey.
The nicest. The Wileys had a farm, and Stack says it opened up a whole new world for the kids, especially Aleatha, who was getting her first real taste of childhood.
Ugh.
Aleatha says they would play outside all the time. They'd go visit the animals and help feed them or gather eggs. Quote, living at the Wileys was warm and caring. She took care of the meals and the clothes, and that felt good and secure.
Oh, my
Referring
gosh.
to Mrs. Wiley.
Our daughters are going to be 5. Can you imagine them taking
That
care?
is where my mind kept going.
Yeah, no.
The whole time I was watching this, I was 5 years old with
horrible.
3 smaller children. She's making them breakfast.
It's horrible.
Get washing their clothes. I mean, oh my gosh.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
She was so happy that Mrs. Wiley, took care of the clothes and the meals. Stack says in December 1962, the dream ended. Mrs. Wiley received a call from the children's father saying he wanted to take them back for Christmas.
No.
But we love Mrs. Wiley because she's no, that doesn't seem very good for the children.
No.
Mm-hmm.
They think they're having Christmas here. Let's let them have Christmas here, and then we can figure it out. So amazingly, they agreed to let her keep them for Christmas morning and Christmas dinner, and then they would come get the children after that. Not surprisingly, life was the same back at their home. Aleatha was left to care for the other children again. But Stack says the situation did not go unnoticed. The neighbors were concerned, so they called the police, which, thank goodness. Mm-hmm. So the kids were removed again and taken back into the foster care system. Eventually, the children were placed with separate families and lost contact with one another.
Why couldn't they have just gone right back to that sweetie family?
Probably because once those kids left them, some other kids might have went in,
Been
right?
placed with them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So sad.
Aleatha had been sent from foster home to foster home for 4 years until she was eventually sent back to the Wileys. Mrs. Wiley says they'd called her and asked if she'd remembered Aleatha. She said, I sure do. And they asked if she'd like to have her back, and she said yes. And within 4 minutes, she was walking through their front door. But Mrs. Wiley says it took Aleatha a while to loosen up. So she explains she expected this warm little girl that she had before, but she had to realize that Aleatha had spent her whole life having horrible, horrible experiences.
Yeah.
And she was changed. So Stack says that Aleatha's years in foster care had left her a bitter, temperamental adolescent. She longed to find her natural parents and eventually ran away from the Wileys, which is so sad.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you looking for those people? They're terrible people. Like,
That's just what kids do. It's so sad.
It's just heartbreaking. Like, how much more abuse can this girl have suffered at the parents that, like, didn't care about her and then only took her back to serve their ego?
I think, right.
The dad wasn't like, come back, I've learned my lesson. He was like, come back and let's have it be the exact same way. This poor girl.
I think some kids just hope that if they could just see who I am and that they will love me and they'll change. Or whatever.
My God. That is like, this segment is very triggering and it is like just heartbreaking. It really is.
Yeah. Like somewhere in her mind, being with her real family was going to be the best thing. Even though
it was going to work
the
out.
Worst thing.
Yeah.
So Aleatha, who's only like a teenager, saves her allowances and saves up $21. Her plan was to go to Sand Springs, Oklahoma to find her parents. She says she had an idea that her grandmother lived there. So she bought a bus ticket to Oklahoma. She remembers riding along, having memories of when she was little, and all she could think about was getting there. Aleatha traveled more than 600 miles to Sand Springs, Oklahoma. With nowhere to go, she went to a local church. The minister there agreed to drive Aleatha around to try and find the farm that she remembered. And I was like, part of me was like, you're a honey for like hearing her and like helping her, but at the same time, you really should have just taken her to the police.
Also, it's creepy, kind of. I mean, I don't think he was creepy, but, like, thank goodness it wasn't a bad situation.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
600 miles? What is she, like, 13 years old or something? Like 12
Yeah,
years
something
old?
like that. So Stack says the two drove around for several hours looking for the farm Aleatha remembered, but to no avail. And in the thing, she's like, no, it was bigger than that. And it's like, honey, you were 5. You don't remember how big it was. Everything was big.
How were you paying attention? You were too busy washing and cooking for your family.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 100. So late that afternoon, the minister finally did drop Aleatha off at the local police station. They identified her as a runaway, and she went back into foster care again. But I don't know why she didn't just go back to the Wileys. It would be years until Aleatha would be reunited with her real parents, but she never found her brothers Richard and Marty or her sister Noreen. So Aleatha, in the interview with tears in her eyes, says, it's like reading a good book, and you get a phone call and you have to rush off to work, and you have to put that book down. Most people know they can come back to that book. I've never gone back, and I want to know. I want to know. It's so sad.
It's too sad.
So that's the end of the segment. This segment was part of the February 1991 episode. And thanks to viewer tips, Aleatha has been reunited with her siblings.
Yay!
But the facts behind the reunion were kept secret from the broadcast, and the reunion was not filmed because of the emotional pain that Aleatha had gone through in her siblings' childhood. So she was just, UM, of course, is probably like, we'll film it, let's do this. And she was like, no.
Yeah, they were probably like, we'll pay for you to fly out there.
Yep. So that being said, Aleatha asked for her privacy, so I couldn't find a ton of information.
Mm-hmm.
I did find one news article that had a photo of her getting pinned when she first graduated nursing school.
Oh.
Because her class was the first class to ever graduate from that school. So that was cute. It was like a big photo of her getting her little pin. And I did find Aleatha today on Facebook. She's 65 and lives in Colorado. She is still a nurse. If I'm piecing everything together correctly, it seems like she was married for a while, had 3 children, was divorced, and is now remarried.
Okay.
Because I found a last name she has used before, a man around her age with that last name, and then 3 people around my age with also that last name.
Okay.
And then one of those people, I can confirm via Facebook, is her daughter.
Okay.
So it appears that she and that daughter have a really great relationship, and she's also a grandma. And I think she's a grandma of at least 3. So she's created her own family, which is just so nice. And she looks super happy. She posts recipes and stuff on Facebook. I could not confirm that I found any of her siblings.
Interesting.
Part of that is because their name at the point of being put into foster care was Smith. And I'm sure they probably got new last names because I found one person that I thought was maybe Richard. but the dates didn't quite match up correctly. And then I tried to like snoop her Facebook for pictures with them, but it's only her profile pictures that you can see, so it's mostly just her with her grandkids. But yeah, so that's it, because she wanted her life to be private.
Yeah,
so
that's totally fine.
Good.
Yeah, so I hope she's still in contact with the siblings, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what those people who you were so young with, they could be completely different adults, and it's understandable. There's a lot of pain there.
Yeah. The trauma, absolutely.
And we've seen ones before, too, where different siblings had different ideas of how that childhood was.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, which parent was abusive or not, or,
or whether or not it was even abuse. I mean,
Right.
you know, gosh.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oof, I have goosebumps. Yeah.
Good
These
job.
last loves are just
Oh, my
the
gosh.
trauma that these kids are subjected to is, it's just, oh, God.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm glad she found them either way, because I'm sure that gave her some sort of closure on...
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
yeah.
So...
Nice work.
Okay, so things to share and feel. I know Allison and I have a similar one, but I'll pull another one out. What do you have, Allison?
Ooh, I have the podcast called The Apology Line by Wondery, which can't stop making amazing podcasts.
Can't stop.
I just love them so much. So it's about one of my favorite things in the world, the late 1970s, early 1980s in New York City. In the Village, a man hangs up flyers advertising a phone number with essentially an answering machine, and it's called the Apology Line, and you can call and apologize anonymously. And the podcast is essentially hosted by his wife, Marissa, and it's sort of about... It's advertised as what if a killer called into this apology line. It's a story of how this apology line is born and then affects their lives throughout its existence. It's so good.
Yeah.
I loved it so much.
It's really good. And it's like the story of basically how art can turn into its own thing that the artist didn't ever expect. And because they're both artists in different formats. So, yeah, it's really good. I recommend also.
Yay! I love when that happens.
I know. It's fun. I have one from Wondery also. And y'all, you have to listen to it. You have to. And it's not a choice. And the next time I see you, you better have listened to it. The podcast is The Thai Cave Rescue, which
I haven't listened, but I already subscribed to it.
I think the whole podcast is called Against the Odds.
Against the Odds.
So they're going to have different stories, but the first story is The Thai Cave Rescue, and Wondery puts it out. I didn't even know about this story. I think it was
Me either.
2018, this teenage soccer team, but like young teens, like 13, in Thailand. They and their assistant coach go exploring these these caves, and it's like not yet the rainy season, so they think they'll be okay. But the cave gets flooded, and they get stuck down there, and it is in an air pocket. I mean, in like a pocket where water can't get to. It is so incredible. And there's still episodes coming out. I can't wait till the next one comes out. I think there's 3 or 4 out at the time we're recording this. Y'all, I can't wait to talk to you about it. It's so good. And there's a documentary either out or coming out about it too. It's just amazing. So they involve these English divers, because there are not that many like world-class divers in the world. So they often have to like pull from other countries. And it's so amazing. It's and don't look anything up about it, but no, I won't say it.
What?
Y'all, you gotta just listen. It's so good.
Okay.
Cool.
I love it.
Terrifying, but cool.
Oh my gosh, it's so sad.
Oh my God, you just need to watch The Descent and then you will never go near a cave.
Oh, no.
I've still never seen that movie.
I haven't either.
I know it's one of your tops.
It's my tops. I love it.
Is that the one where he cuts his hand off?
No.
No, but that was also amazing.
I don't care about a guy cutting his arm off in a rock. That's
Oh,
not my
wait.
thing.
I have seen The Descent. That's like the scary one where there's scary things down there.
Yes.
I've
And
seen
it's
that.
all like badass ladies and they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Okay. I finally watched Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel
Ooh.
in its entirety. It took me a while because of a 6-day power outage in the middle. But I liked it.
Did
And-
you? I didn't finish it. I just watched the first one.
Yeah.
Not because I didn't like it, just because I wasn't able to get back to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I believe they're going to be covering other topics because the overlying title is Crime Scene. But this one was specifically focusing on the Cecil Hotel and the Elisa Lam case, which has always been one of my top, like, unsolved mysteries, like, forever.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I've always pondered this one. I've always had my ideas about what I thought happened. And I think the series does a really good job going down all the rabbit holes. What I found fun about it was that they really went into, like, everything that everyone on the internet has ever said and tried to figure out.
Fun.
Oh, that's fun.
There were so many weird little details I did not know people were analyzing. And it just made the whole case, like, creepier to me and really, like, more interesting. There was even, like, a person that people suspected for a while who ended up having their life ruined by this. But yeah, and I mean, at the end, they kind of prove more or less that one of the theories is likely what happened. But yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was interesting and fun.
I have to finish it.
Is it on Netflix?
Yeah, and I mean, I would assume they're going to have more seasons that are on different topics.
Cool.
And just some of the history of the Cecil was interesting to learn too. Like,
That general manager.
oh my God, girl.
Girl.
Ride or die for that hotel. Ride or die.
Oh, I know. She's like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. She's just like, this is it for me.
I know. I saw a meme that was like, I hope somebody someday loves me like this woman loves the Cecil Hotel.
Yes, 100.
Yeah, those interviews with her are great. But anyway, yeah, I liked it.
All right. So this was a big episode. Episode 18 was big. What do we have? It was a doozy. Some might say it was a beefy. I would never say that. I wouldn't dare.
I would say it has gravy on it, honestly.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
What do we have for episode 19?
What do we have?
Well, we're going to keep that mysterious legend party going with the Butcher of Kingsbury Run.
And I have a final appeal segment about Patricia or Patty Stallings. This case is insane.
Yes.
Okay, and then segment 3 is an unexplained death, and it is an Oregon case, y'all. And it's the story of Michael Franke.
I don't know, man. UM is like giving us a bunch of banana stories these last couple episodes.
Yep, they are leveling up as we speak.
And then I wrap it up with a missing segment of Oded Gordon.
All right. So we will see you then. In the meantime, you can go to patreon.com/Resolved Mysteries Podcast if you're interested in supporting us there. If you subscribe at the $5 a month level or higher, you'll get ad-free episodes, 2 extra episodes a month, and other goodies. To see photos we reference in the episodes, follow us on Instagram at Resolved Mysteries Podcast, on Facebook and Twitter at Resolve the Pod. And don't forget, you can also see extra photos along with a lot of other great things, including our Sharesy Feelsy page on resolvedmysteriespodcast.com. And you can contact us at resolvedmysteriespodcast@gmail.com or at our P.O. Box 14005, Portland, Oregon 97293. Allison, have you visited that P.O. Box recently? Okay. So it's just it's still overflowing. It's still overflowing with the gifts you've sent. Speaking of contacting us. Send us your stories for listener short stack episodes so we can keep making them. The only thing we ask is that you send more than a link and maybe put your own narrative spin on things so we can, because we care about all of you, so we love to hear why you care about this story.
And we want you to tell us the story.
Mm-hmm. We want you to do the work for us, so... But it could really be anything, including your nostalgia around the show that we all love, any cold case, any mystery, any thoughts on recent cases we've covered, especially some of the ones from this last episode.
Yeah.
It's just the three of us. We want to hear what other people think. So.
We don't really know that much. We're wondering.
We're idiots, so. And then last but not least, subscribe, please, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like us, leave a 5-star review and tell a friend. It really helps us out. And for every review we receive, we donate $1 to an organization. And this month's is GEMS. And we love ya.
We sure do love ya.
We do.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Like the Incas, like
I will not think about the Incas. No.
Wait, what specifically about the Incas?
Just like if you're thinking of like hard times to like make a fucking farm happen.
What? But why?
Let's go all the way back.
Yeah, let's keep going.
I'm just saying, people have been doing this since the dawn of time.
She's like, yo, the Dark Ages? That was disgusting.
Honey, think about the Incas. And yes, it's the cultural group that I will keep bringing up. The Incas. It could have been so many options.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. Anyway, it's my hell, and I'm so glad to be born when I was.